Hallo, willkommen, es heißt Laura und das ist mein YouTube-Kanal Sprechen mit Laura. Hi everyone, my name is Laura and this is my channel Languages with Laura. And welcome to today's video, which is if I could do my language learning journey differently, what would I change? I feel like I've been going through a lot of reflection lately because of these new steps that I will be taking coming up very soon in just a couple of months with the move and the new education and picking up a couple of languages, traveling. I've got a lot coming up, and so because of all this, I've been kind of reflecting on my life, and especially with school, I've been, talking about my history, my past, and I think, what would I have done differently if I could do things differently? I do not have a lot of regrets in life. But then the grudges that I do have, I hold on to like nobody's business. So if you don't know a lot about my background with languages, I've got a couple of videos talking about, like my introduction video to this channel, I believe, is like my history, what languages I started learning, when, why, etc. and so forth. So that might be helpful to get a better background, but you could also just probably follow along in this video anyway. So let's get into it. So the first language that I would talk about is Spanish. See, with Spanish, I started learning in first grade. Hi, gatita. Yeah. So I started learning Spanish in first grade, and the first thing I would do differently is not something I would have control over, and it was not something that was available at the time, but just thinking about like going forward, I would have really loved to be in an immersion school. I know that this never could have happened for me as a young child because I'm pretty sure the school that I went to did not get an immersion program until a year or two after I was there. Like the beginning class, the first class that would have the option to do immersion was like the grade or two after me. So it wasn't set up for me to do it, and I had to go to the school that I did because my mom worked there, and so that's what was convenient for us. And I also never would have been able to go to immersion school because I don't think at that time my family was super like into the idea, super familiar with it, or who would have done it, because neither of my parents really ever learned another language. Their whole lives are in English, and so I think to have one of their kids go off and like have half or a majority of her day in another language was something they were not going to do. Not that they would discourage it, but they wouldn't know what to do with me if I came home and like refused to speak English or something because I was, a crabby, bratty child, who knows. But like looking back, it would have been really cool if I could have done immersion. And I get a lot of people actually ask me, like people in my life and people in my Spanish classes ask me if I went to an immersion school, which is like, aw, you think I did? That's really sweet. But no, I never went to an immersion school. And so that's something that if I could have done things differently and I had a little more control, I would have loved to go to an immersion school. The other thing with Spanish is that there are a couple of things with Spanish because I took Spanish from first grade all the way up to 8th grade, and then for 9th and 10th grade I switched to French and was not studying Spanish. That was when I discovered Duolingo, because very soon into learning French I thought, this is great, I love this, I don't regret it, but I want to keep going with Spanish. That was my first idea of, ooh, I really want to learn 2 languages. And I was like, ooh, is this a lot? I was very unsure because I was the only one that I knew of that was going to do both languages. And so I started on Duolingo while I was starting French. And I wish that I had that mindset going into high school more, going into 9th grade and being like, I might only have room for my schedule for French, but making a plan to learn Spanish. I was going into high school, and so I didn't know exactly what to expect, but once I realized that I could study Spanish outside of my regular classes, I wish I had been more intentional on doing so. And I did eventually take Spanish up again in the 11th grade after going on a school trip to the Dominican Republic, where I was able to use Spanish, and I thought I had forgotten everything about Spanish that I had learned. I thought I wasn't going to be able to communicate with anybody and I wouldn't know how to talk at all past introductions, and I was wrong, and that's what gave me the confidence to relearn Spanish again, but in a more formal setting. So I wish that I had been more formal with it from the beginning of not taking classes in school. Also wish with Spanish and French really too, because I learned them in school. I got good grades in those classes. I did. I got A's in Spanish and French my entire career in school. I don't even know if I got a B in any Spanish or French class in college, in university, which is great. I mean, obviously, you know, that shows that I'm studying and I'm practicing and doing my homework, but I wish I had been more intentional about other supplementary materials going outside of what was provided in the classroom. So not just like my textbook and my homework, but being more intentional about watching TV shows or listening to music or podcasts, especially doing other things that allowed me to practice the language and get into the culture. Because nowadays when I say I speak Spanish, I a lot of times say I speak like an academic Spanish. Like if you watch my Spanish blog, I kind of touch a little bit on, I speak academic Spanish. I do really well in Spanish classes. I can do academic translation projects and I can do things like that. But like plop me on the street. When you plopped me on the street in Ecuador when I was there, I could get around, but it wasn't as comfortable as I thought it should have been, for the fact that I had been learning Spanish for almost 12 years of my life at that point. Because I also took Spanish in college. Because I had taken Spanish for almost 12 years of my life, I should have been way more conversational with people just meeting on the street or vendors or whoever than I was when I was actually there. That is because I think school set me up to be an academically Spanish speaker and not a like casual let's talk to people Spanish speaker, which I understand from a scholastic standpoint, like yeah, that's what you're trying to do. But I wish I had taken it upon myself to realize the difference and realize what was going on so that I could fill in that gap myself, for myself. And I know I would have had fun doing it. So yeah, when it comes to Spanish and with French too, I wish I had been just much more casual with the language in my off time and with my studies with it, so that it would be quicker to have conversations and just easier to understand people, easier to understand slang, easier to communicate naturally and not sound like a walking textbook with good pronunciation and grammatic accuracy, but like actually be able to talk with people, you know? I don't think I really have any other, if I would do it differently with French, because again, I didn't have too much of a choice because I learned it in high school. My French teacher was American, but, you know, themed everything around France. And we took a trip to France in high school and things like that. And so when I speak, you know, when I speak French nowadays, I'm mostly speaking it to like West African French speakers. I don't really speak with Canadian French speakers, but if I wanted to, I could probably do that if I wanted to make the conscious effort. But I'm not speaking to anybody from France or even from like Switzerland or any other European countries that also speak French, you know, like Belgium and all that, Andorra. I'm not speaking to European French speakers. I'm speaking to African French speakers, which is really fun and really cool. And they always tell me, you know, you have such a France accent. And I'm like, I'm taking that because it's better to have a France accent than like an thickly American, you know, like bonjour, je suis Laura, et aujourd'hui je veux parler de, like, I'm glad I don't have that, but it is very interesting to hear everybody constantly tell me I sound like I'm from France, from people who are not from France. Obviously, when I do talk to French people, like, you're American, just speak English. So I don't regret learning or concentrating on France, but I do wish I had been a little bit more exposed earlier on in my French learning career of other Francophone countries. Even in college, one of the projects I was doing was talking about African Francophone literature, and my professor, who was from France, told me that this was a bad topic idea and that I probably wouldn't get a good grade and I wouldn't be able to do a 10-minute presentation. And she was completely wrong. I did have a 12-minute presentation. I went over the time limit, and she did grade me fairly on my French speaking abilities, but it was just one of those things of like, I was never educated on Francophone outside of France. So I wish I had done more with that, but also having gone to Senegal and meeting a bunch of Nigerians and Cameroonian people, just people who speak French, not from France. I can understand them and they can understand me, that's great, but I do wish I was a little bit looser with my French. But yeah, it's not like I would do much differently per se because of it though. Arabic, there's a lot. Arabic is an interesting one for me because there are so many things I wish I could have done differently to make it better. And it's not, again, it's not like it's anybody's fault. This is not my professor's fault. It's not my teacher's fault. It's not my parents' fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just looking back at the experiences I had with this new knowledge, this hindsight 2020, what would I have done differently now knowing where I would have been in the future? With Arabic, it was so incredibly tricky because I learned Arabic for a semester in high school, and then I started learning it in college, and I had a 1 semester break, and I started from the beginning. So that first semester, it was great. I don't regret that at all because it was really good to review what I hadn't used for a semester and just not complicate the pathway as an, at the time, Arabic major. I was going to major in Arabic. And I was an Arabic major for 2 years. So that was great. However, it was during my freshman year, it was the spring of my freshman year, that COVID happened and everything shut down and went online. And as soon as my Arabic classes went online, basically I stopped learning. I did the homework, but I found it to be very difficult. Classes seemed absolutely impossible because this was also back before everybody really upgraded the Wi-Fi to be able to do classes over Zoom reliably for hours on end. And so I was constantly getting, your bandwidth is full, your bandwidth can't handle this issues, and like online learning just did not work. And that's why I took a 2-year break in between my college years, was to let the world recover a little bit and get back to in-person classes. But I wish that I had tried just a little bit harder during that online period, because there's basically at least a semester's worth of classes that I did not learn anything with Arabic. I don't think I learned a single vocabulary word. Grammar just kind of went over my head. I really just got through the class. I got a good grade in the class, but I wasn't actually learning, and I feel like I didn't do enough to actually try. And it's very interesting because now, currently, the only way I can learn Arabic basically is online and self-study. So back then, I couldn't handle online and self-study with language learning. I did not think it was something I could do or that would be successful or that I would make any progress with. And now it is the only way I can keep up with my languages because I don't use them unless I'm talking to myself or to my cats, apparently. So it's very interesting to see how this mentality has changed for me. And so I wish that this change had come about earlier so that I had put more effort into learning Arabic when it was an online course. And that's why, like, I'm super shy with my Arabic. I don't actually use it as much as I should because I took 2 years of Arabic, but I feel like I can only communicate as if I had 1 year of Arabic. And that has always been very disheartening. And so I have felt like there's a lot of catch up I needed to do. But also another thing that I wish could have been different, which again was kind of outside of my control, was that the first 2 years at the program I was doing for Arabic, you learn Fusha. You learn modern standard Arabic. You're not learning a specific dialect. My professors were from Egypt, and I had a roommate who was from Tunisia, and it was very interesting because I would ask her to help me, and she knew that I was learning Fusha, and she knew that that's what my homework would be, but then she'd be like, this is actually Egyptian. This is not modern standard. This is Egyptian dialect. And so I don't always know, like obviously I know كيف حضرتك versus ازيك. ازيك is definitely Egyptian, I know that, versus كيف حضرتك, like how are you doing formally, like is not. But there are just so many other little things that I'm like, I think this is modern standard, but I'm not sure. And I was planning on doing a study abroad in Jordan after I completed the Fusha Mandarin 2 years requirement. I was gonna go into Jordanian Arabic and like the Levantine dialect and do a study abroad. But again, that ended up not happening for me. So I just took 2 years of Fusha, and that was it. And I really wish that I could have done more dialect-based studies from the beginning. And again, that is something that I could have done on my own, but I was a full-time college student who was also working 4 jobs and still not making enough money to cover my share of rent. So it's also not like I really had the time to add on extra studies on top of my classes. But maybe if I had found a program that did 1 year of Fusha and then into a specific dialect or something, like I wish it could have been more like that. I also have other like smaller regrets on various specific things about learning Arabic. For example, the textbook and my professor did not have us start to learn plurals of words until the second semester of our second year, and it was going back and relearning all the words that we had already learned, but now in the plural version. And I have found that now that I am like starting from the beginning again with Arabic, that it is so much easier to learn the word and its plural at the same time. And I know that there are rules of how to pluralize a word in Arabic, but there are multiple rules, and those rules are constantly broken and have irregulars. So I'm just finding it easier to just memorize the word and the plural of it at the same time together. Just memorize them together, as opposed to trying to learn a grammar rule to figure it out. And so that is something I wish that I had known was going to happen, so that I could have retroactively done it from the beginning myself, because that would have just made everything so much easier. Russian is an interesting one, because I think my biggest thing that I would change with my Russian language studies is when I came back from Central Asia, I started taking Russian classes in university. And I thought to myself, I don't want to have the same thing with Arabic happen where, you know, I learned the alphabet, I learned the basic greetings, but if I start at the beginning class, like the 101 class, I'm going to learn all that again, and I'm going to be super bored, and I'm obviously not going to learn anything because I learned it all already. I also knew, so I was already leaning towards going into the second year of Russian, going into intermediate in Russian, because I had done a year's worth of living abroad. However, I knew this. My Russian teacher in Central Asia, in Kyrgyzstan, did not teach me any grammar. I remember I asked her to teach me grammar, and she said, "You are here and I am teaching you to survive, to be able to ride the bus, to go grocery shopping. And the cases, like the 6 Russian cases, are not going to be very important if you can't like ask for a tomato. You need to learn the word for tomato before asking how you can, before, learning tomato in different cases, and etc. and so forth." And I completely understand why she did this. And I do appreciate that, because I could just, as long as I had the vocabulary, I could go around and talk and my point would be made, and nobody corrected me on anything or thought down on me if I made a mistake in Russian or anything like that. Like, it truly was what I needed to live in Kyrgyzstan at the time. It was what I needed to live in the small town where, they did not speak English. They spoke Kyrgyz and probably some Russian, or Kyrgyz and Russian, but no English. So I completely understand why she didn't feel the need to teach me really any grammar for Russian. But then going back to the US and saying, okay, now I'm going to study it officially in an institution with other Americans, I thought, I'll just catch up on the grammar on my own. It'll be fine, because, I've studied 3 other languages I can just catch up on grammar on my own. I wish I hadn't done that, because for 2 reasons. One, I did not put in the time and effort to learn the grammar that I missed before the classes. And 2, the intermediate Russian teacher I ended up having in the US was a one-time adjunct professor, somebody who had never taught at this university before, somebody who wasn't going to continue teaching there, and her teaching style and my learning style did not match up at all. It did not match up at all. So I struggled quite a bit in that class because it was super grammar focused. I wasn't understanding the material she was trying to teach, and then I was already significantly behind with grammar because of that. So I wish that I just had gotten over my pride a little bit and just started Russian from the beginning, the 101 class when I got to university in the States, because while yes, I already knew the alphabet, I already knew how to introduce myself, and I already knew some basic phrasing, it would have caught me up on the grammar that I didn't know and really should have, but also would have been one of the professors who has been teaching Russian to American students for years on years on years. And that, I think I would have had a much easier time learning from him and things like that. I also know that the Russian program at the university kind of had high hopes for me specifically because I had been abroad, but been abroad in a Russian-speaking country that was not Russia. And because they were trying to get me to talk to the study abroad to get programs set up in other Central Asian and East European countries so that the Russian students would have more options to do a study abroad, not just in Moscow, and that's it. And then I think in turn they were hoping that that would draw more people to the Russian studies program because it was a very small program. So there was a lot going on there that I didn't understand as a 19-year-old going into college for the first time, but I wish I had done it safe and just started from the beginning of Russian. I do also wish though, if with my time in Kyrgyzstan, that I had been a little more pushy and intentional about learning just a little bit of like Kyrgyz and Korean, because we had 4 other people from Korea who were doing basically the same thing that we were doing but with Korean instead of English, and there were a lot of Korean teachers and they were all from Korea and most of them didn't even speak English or Russian, they just kind of spoke Korean, and I wish I had spent more time with them to maybe pick up some more Korean because I literally only know like 안녕하세요, 감사합니다, like, and that's it. I literally joined a choir while I was there, and it was like a specialty one-time choir. We only had like 2 or 3 practices, and one of the songs were in Korean, so I can sing that entire song in Korean, and it's a really pretty springtime song. But I had an opportunity with native Korean speakers to learn, and the same thing with Kyrgyz. I know, like, along with asking my Russian teacher if I could learn some grammar, I do also remember being like, I would also love to learn some Kyrgyz, and they said that, well, she said that the Americans who come to teach English learn Russian, and the Koreans who come to teach Korean learn Kyrgyz because, you know, of sounds and grammar. It's easier for Americans to learn Russian than it is Kyrgyz, and it's easier for Koreans to learn Kyrgyz than it is to learn Russian. And I just kind of accepted that and moved on, and I wish that I had been just a little bit more intentional about, okay, but I do want to learn some Kyrgyz. I do want to expose myself more to Kyrgyz and not just Russian. So the other languages, I don't really have too many regrets or things that I would do differently with them, because either these are newer languages, I haven't been studying them for very long, I haven't had the time to wish I had done things differently, or they've been very short term. Like Mandarin, I wish I had kept up with Mandarin because I studied it for 1 year, but then didn't have the chance to do that. And I didn't have the room in my college schedule to keep doing Mandarin classes, even just for fun. So my Mandarin has gone way down, but I still really want to learn it. So yes, I wish I had kept up with it, but it was just not something I could do. There's nothing that I would realistically be able to do different to change this regrets. Wolof, I've not really been studying Wolof now that my partner's done learning it and we are not planning to go back to Senegal. It is a really cool language still, like I do want to speak it, but I'm not at a place where I can invest the time to study the language, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a little bummed. I don't want to let it go, but I do kind of have to let it go. But I have no regrets, I went to Senegal, I learned the language for like 2 or 3 weeks very intensively, and that's just kind of it. So German, I don't really have any regrets. The only thing I would do differently with German would have been to actually take German in high school, because here's the thing, I took Mandarin in high school instead of German. Like the conscious decision to do Mandarin instead of German. And that's because my friends who were in the German class told me that they didn't like the German teacher, that she wasn't a very good teacher, and like the class was just not super fun, not super great. And I listened to them, which was pretty stupid because they are not people who enjoy learning languages. So them not enjoying the class was not a true reflection on the teacher or the class. It was just, it's not in their interest. I had no interest in algebra. I had to take the class, and I wouldn't tell you very good things about the class, but that is not necessarily a reflection on the teacher. It's the fact that I couldn't care less for algebra. I wish that I had not listened to my friends and taken the German class, but I also know that if I had taken German, I would not have had room in my schedule for Mandarin. And I think it's easier for me to learn German on my own as an individual as opposed to Mandarin. Like, I am so incredibly thankful that I started Mandarin with an in-person teacher 3 days a week for a year, because I could really understand the concept of tones, and I learned the basics of character writing and how the characters build off of each other and things like that. Like, all things that would have been really hard for me to understand if I were learning it individually, like I'm trying to do with German. So, and even with German, I have not been studying it near as much as I thought I would after starting it. So German is just kind of floating around fuzzy in the air. Like, I did the intro in German, but I'm not like doing this whole video in German or anything crazy like that. So I don't have any regrets there. It's just, I could have done things differently. I could have taken German instead of Mandarin, and I probably would have stuck with it more than I ended up sticking with Mandarin. But I know that I want to keep learning Mandarin going forward eventually one day. So I always feel like I should learn German because so many Americans speak German. German and English are related. I have German heritage. My grandfather, or like my great-grandfather was from Germany. My great-great-grandfather was from Germany. And yeah, like, there are reasons why I would learn German, but they're not actually motivating me enough at the moment to learn German. So I truly do wonder if my time would have been better spent with Mandarin, something I was a little more invested in than German. But again, it's not a regret. I don't know if I would make that change, but we'll see. We'll see. Well, we're gonna just keep going on how we're going and just kind of see what happens with that. Dankeschön, thank you very much for watching. Also, I am in a different background. I did not address this at the beginning of the video, but I am at my parents' house because our house is all packed up because we are currently in the middle of a move. So some of these upcoming videos are going to be in my parents' house with a different background, and that's why like making videos has been very sporadic. Thank you all very much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment down below if there are any changes that you would have made in your language learning journey, because I think that material like this is good for people to watch, because if like you want to start learning Arabic or you're at the beginning of learning Arabic and you hear that one of my regrets was not learning plurals at the beginning, then you think, oh, maybe I should do that. So like, comment down below if there are any things that you would have changed about your language education. Maybe help people with their language education, help them think about the best way for them to learn the language. So that's kind of the whole point of this. I know a lot of mine were like very scholastic based, like I wish I had taken classes or invested time differently, but like, if you're sitting here and you're thinking, I'm not investing the time into my language learning journey that I want to, let this like be your wake-up call and squat or get off the pot. Like, find a way to invest the time, make the time for it, or, you know, figure out something else. I'm not saying don't learn the language, I'm just saying, like, you know, take that time to reflect. If you're doing what you want to do, great. If not, how can you do better? What changes can you make to your routine, your scheduling, your planning, your language learning materials, your resources, your motivation, whatever. Take this time to just reflect on your language learning journey, and if you need to make a change, because I will be making some changes this summer, and I will be making a lot of changes this fall, and so taking this time to reflect what I wish I had done differently. Now I know that I want to watch more Spanish TV shows. I want to watch more Spanish-speaking content creators to help me become more naturally conversational and not just, if you hand me a medical document, I can probably translate it because I took a medical Spanish interpretation class. Like, that's great if I were a medical translator, but I am not currently a medical translator. So yeah, comment down below, let's chat. I would love to hear from you. If you like this video, again, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you like language learning content, and hit the bell to be notified because, like I said, I have lots of really cool video ideas that I'm really excited to do. I just need to sit down and do them, and I'm finally gonna do that, so yay! So hit the bell to be notified when those go up. I am gonna try and post a video every week or every other week, just to try and get on a regular basis of content. But the reason that I will take these breaks like this, as opposed to just forcing out a video, is because I want to make sure that I am doing content that I enjoy making, because ultimately it will be content that is more likely you will enjoy consuming. It will actually be helpful for you or motivating for you. So if there's a break, it's because I want to make sure I'm doing good quality content as opposed to just cranking things out to boost numbers or anything like that. So hit the bell to be notified so that when I do post, you don't miss it. And I have other language learning, social media type things in the description below, so you can just keep up to date with me and my life a little bit more there, especially on my Instagram. So be sure to check that out. And yeah, Dankeschön, and until I see you all in the next video, tschüss!